Midnight was the hour when the world on Wren Street stilled, when even the restless wind seemed to hush, tiptoeing past rows of brick houses with their drawn curtains and silent rooms. Only the faint golden pools from lamplight on the sidewalk broke the darkness, illuminating slivers of pavement and the shadows of passing clouds. At number 23, nestled at the very end beneath a heavy ancient oak tree, Nora Mallet crept down the stairs, careful to avoid the step that squeaked. She moved like a ghost, her socked feet silent on the old runner, her breath caught in her throat. The rest of her family slept in ignorance upstairs, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, the only sign that time was moving forward at all. Nora's heart hammered as she pulled her coat around her thin shoulders and tiptoed to the front door, pausing as a branch tapped against the window. Just the wind, she told herself, but she waited for her pulse to slow before reaching out for the brass letterbox. That battered metal flap was her secret portal to a life she barely understood, a channel for mysteries that reached into the heart of her own family's past. It was here, for the past 4 months, that the silent letters arrived. No return address, always typed as if the sender feared their handwriting would betray them, always signed only with a single, looping initial, R. Tonight, she was not disappointed. A crisp envelope waited on the mat, sealed tight, its edges sharp against her fingertips. Nora's hands shook as she picked it up, glancing back at the staircase to make sure she hadn't been followed. The house was quiet as ever, but she felt the eyes of her older brother Sammy even in his absence. She suspected he might have seen her one night, the way his gaze lingered on the hall after dinner, but he never spoke of it. If he had, she was sure their parents would never let her out after dark again. The secrecy had become its own heavy ritual, one that felt both thrilling and terrifying. She retreated to her small bedroom at the back of the house, the lamp turned low, the curtains pulled tight to keep the night at bay. She slit the envelope open with the nail file she kept hidden in her desk, careful not to tear the contents. The letter inside was brief, but somehow more urgent, darker than any before. Midnight, old garden. The truth is beneath the roses. Come alone, or secrets will be lost forever. No details, no explanation. Nora stared at the page, her thoughts swirling, the chill of the house settling over her like a second skin. Who was R? And why did these letters, sometimes threats, sometimes riddles, sometimes cryptic confessions, always seem to know her family's history better than she did herself? Who watched her movements? Who traced the story of her life with such haunting precision? A cold shiver ran down her spine. The garden had been her grandmother's domain, a place of wild beauty and quiet wonder, now tangled and neglected with years of disuse. Beneath the roses, her grandmother used to say, were wishes buried in the earth, seeds of hope or regret, depending on who told the story. Nora had always thought it a child's fable, a way to comfort her on stormy nights. But now, as she read the letter again, her hands trembled with something like dread. She waited until the clock downstairs chimed a single, resonant note. 11:30. It was nearly time. She pulled on her oldest boots and wound a scarf around her neck, the fabric muffling the sound of her breath. With each minute that passed, her anticipation sharpened. She paused at her door, listening to the gentle cadence of her mother's snoring, the steady rustle of Sammy turning in his sleep. She almost turned back, but curiosity and a sense of destiny pushed her on. Outside, the night air bit at her cheeks. The moon hung high, casting long shadows across the frost-tipped grass. She slipped through the gate into the garden, guided by memory and moonlight, her every step deliberate. The rose bushes stood tall and unkempt, thorns sharp as daggers, petals dry and brown with the season's end. She knelt, careful to avoid the thorns, and brushed aside brittle leaves and cold earth until her fingers hit something hard. A tin box, rusted and cold, buried deeper than she expected. She tugged it free, breath steaming in the chill air, and pried it open with the edge of her scarf. Inside lay a bundle of old letters, her grandmother's handwriting unmistakable, elegant and looping, each word a memory etched on yellowed paper. Beneath the letters, wrapped in a faded silk handkerchief, was a single photograph, brittle with age. The faces stared up at her. Her grandmother, Farida, with her gentle smile, her mother as a young woman, eyes bright and wary, and a third figure, a man with a jagged scar across his jaw, standing slightly apart, his gaze wary but intense. Nora's mind raced. The silent letters were not a game. Someone wanted her to uncover what had been hidden for decades. Why now? Who could know so much about a family's buried secrets? As she closed the tin and slipped back inside, her hands cold, but her mind burning with questions, she tried to calm her pounding heart. She slid the box beneath her bed and tucked the letters into a shoebox, planning to read every word when the house woke to daylight. But as she lay awake, listening to the house settle, she felt certain that tonight was only the beginning. Whatever secrets the roses had guarded, whatever R wanted her to discover, she knew her life was about to change. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the windows. Nora pulled her covers tighter and watched the shadows play on her ceiling, each shape a story, each creak in the walls a whisper of what was still to come. By morning, Nora felt as though she had dreamed the entire midnight encounter, but the tin box and its contents were stubbornly real, tangible proof that secrets had lived in her family long before she was born. The weight of what she'd found pressed on her as she sat at her desk, the house silent except for the murmur of voices drifting up from the kitchen where her parents read the newspaper and bickered over toast. She stared at the photograph again over a cup of tea, grown cold, her eyes tracing the unfamiliar man's scar with the tip of her finger. Who was he, and why had he been so carefully hidden from their stories and their albums? The man seemed out of place beside the young, hopeful faces of her grandmother and mother, his smile forced, his posture guarded. Nora's grandmother, Farida, had died 5 years ago, taking with her a legacy of whispered stories and untold truths. Farida's house had always been a place of old books, spice-laden stews, and strange customs Nora had never fully understood. There were photos, sure, and recipes written in looping script, but always gaps, conversations that ended when Nora or Sammy entered the room, stories that lingered only in half-finished sentences. Her mother, Miriam, never spoke of the past, never indulged in nostalgia. She threw herself into the present, always planning, always organizing, always keeping herself a step ahead of whatever ghosts might be following. Nora considered confiding in Sammy, her brother, who was 2 years older and had always seemed wise beyond his age. She pictured his raised eyebrow, the way he'd listen first and question later, but something held her back, a whisper of warning from the letter. Come alone. She needed answers before the rest of her family became entangled in the web. If the secrets were dangerous or shameful, it was her responsibility to be careful. The thought of protecting her family emboldened her, even as fear fluttered in her chest. She spent the late morning examining the bundle of letters found in the tin box. Each was addressed to "My dearest Mina," her mother's old nickname, she realized with a jolt. The handwriting was elegant, every M and N swirling with affection, yet the words hinted at loss and longing. The letters chronicled years of love and heartache, written by someone named Rihan. The name was unfamiliar, but the emotion in the letters was not. Rehan spoke of secret meetings in the park by the canal, shared books hidden in the library's dusty archives, and evenings spent at the old railway platform where trains came and went, but our love stayed behind. There was mention of a betrayal that had changed everything, and Nora's heart pounded as she read lines like, "If the truth ever comes to light, promise me you will forgive me. And the rose garden is the only witness to our story." Nora carefully copied the dates and locations mentioned, spreading them out on her notebook paper and mapping them to places her grandmother had taken her as a child. She remembered playing on the old swings in the canal park, being told to keep her voice down in the back corners of the library, and watching her mother grow tense and silent every time they passed the railway platform. She saw now how these places were woven into her family's story, not by chance, but by design. The final letter, dated exactly 30 years ago, stopped Nora cold. The tone was different, resigned, final, a goodbye more than a message. By the time you read this, I may be gone, but what we buried beneath the roses was never only ours to keep. If Mina will not reveal the truth, perhaps her daughter will. Nora's hands trembled as she reread the line. Suddenly, everything shifted into sharper focus. The silent letters she had been receiving were echoes of this long ago correspondence, resurrected by someone who knew too much and wanted the secrets unearthed. But who and why now? A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She stuffed the photograph and letters back in the box, her mind racing. The door opened to reveal Sammy, concern etched on his face, and his hair mussed from sleep. "Nora, what's going on?" he asked quietly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "You were up late. I saw you in the garden." Nora hesitated for a heartbeat, then handed him the tin box, letting him see what she'd found. Sammy sat beside her, flipping through the old letters with wide eyes and silent awe. He read for several minutes, the only sound the slow rustle of paper. "We have to tell Mom," he said eventually, his voice low and serious. "She needs to know what's happening." But Nora shook her head, gripping his arm. "Not yet. I need to find out who's sending these new letters. And why now? What if Mom's not ready for this? What if it hurts her more?" Sammy's jaw tightened, a look Nora knew well from years of shared secrets and silent pacts. He didn't like the plan, but he trusted her. "All right, but I'm in this with you, whatever happens." Together, they made a promise. Tonight, they would return to the garden, this time as a team. If someone was watching, they would watch back. If secrets were surfacing, they would face them together, just as they always had. Nora spent the afternoon replaying memories, her grandmother's whispered warnings, her mother's sudden silences, the way Sammy always looked back one more time before leaving a room. She felt like a detective in her own life, following threads she hadn't known existed. By sunset, she and Sammy had mapped every location mentioned in the letters and devised a plan for how to proceed. As darkness fell over Wren Street and the family sat down for dinner, Nora looked around the table, at faces both familiar and mysterious. She realized that the past was not as distant as she'd believed. The secrets buried beneath the roses had already begun to change everything. And as the clock ticked toward midnight once more, Nora and Sammy steeled themselves for whatever truth the garden and the mysterious R would reveal next. Night fell with a restless wind that rattled window panes, and made the ancient oak tree outside Nora's window creak and sway. The world of Wren Street seemed especially fragile, as if the slightest movement could shatter the hush that had settled over every rooftop and fence. Downstairs, the Malik family finished dinner in weary silence, and Nora caught her mother's wary glance. Maybe she sensed the tension in the air, or maybe it was just the way the past had started to stir. After hours of waiting, Nora and Sammy sat on the edge of their beds, whispering plans and checking their flashlights. At last, their parents' bedroom light blinked off, plunging the house into shadow. The siblings slipped from their rooms, socks muffling their steps on the creaky stairs. Sammy clutched the tin box, his jaw set. Nora wrapped her scarf around her neck, steeling herself as she cracked the back door and stepped into the night. The garden looked different after midnight, a landscape sculpted in silver, every leaf glistening, every shadow stretched long by the moon's heavy gaze. The rose bushes seemed taller and thornier, their perfume heady and strange in the chill air. The air buzzed with anticipation, as if the ground itself remembered the secrets it kept. As they crept toward the roses, Sammy paused, holding up his hand. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his breath ghosting in the cold. Nora nodded. There was a soft crunching sound from the side fence, as if someone else was out there. For a moment neither of them moved, listening as the sound faded. Nora's heart pounded in her chest. They stepped forward, flashlight slicing through the darkness. At the spot where Nora had dug the night before, the soil looked disturbed, raked by a hurried hand, or maybe the paw of an animal. Sammy knelt, brushing aside dirt and leaves. His fingers hit something hard. A new envelope, this one sealed with deep red wax, the mark pressed tight. R. Sammy broke the seal, hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet, the familiar cold typewritten message. "You are close. The past does not forgive. Tonight, at the railway platform, come alone, or the truth will remain silent." The threat was unmistakable. Nora felt a chill run through her. She glanced at Sammy, whose brow furrowed with worry and determination. "We can't ignore it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're too close to something big." "You're not going alone," Sammy insisted fiercely. "Whoever is behind this, they know too much. We stick together." But Nora understood the message. Someone wanted her alone. Maybe it was just a power play, but maybe there was real danger. "Stay nearby," she told her brother, squeezing his hand. "Hide where you can see me. If anything happens, call for help. Promise." Reluctantly, Sammy agreed, and they mapped out the route to the old railway platform, a place heavy with memories and sorrow, abandoned for years except by ghosts and wandering cats. Sammy would follow at a distance, ready to step in if she called out. Nora set off through the sleeping neighborhood, the world transformed by darkness. Houses stood mute and watchful. Street lights flickered over cracked pavement. She walked in a bubble of tension, her mind alive with questions. Was the man with the scar her mother's old lover? Was he a friend or a threat? Was R really Rayhan, or someone more dangerous? The railway platform appeared out of the gloom, its timbers warped and sprouting weeds, iron rails shining dully under the moon. Nora could see her breath as she approached, the cold air tinged with the smell of damp wood and old metal. In the yellow cone of her flashlight, a figure waited, tall, hunched, face hidden by the brim of a battered hat. Nora's throat tightened. "Who are you?" she called, trying to keep her voice from shaking. The figure stepped forward, letting the light fall across his features. An old man with deep lines etched into his skin and a familiar scar running along his jaw. His eyes were dark, haunted, but not unkind. "I am Rayhan," he said softly. "I wrote the first letters, but someone else found them, and now they want you to uncover the rest." Nora's hands shook as she fished the photograph from her pocket and held it up. "Why now? Why me?" Rayhan looked away, his breath steaming. "Because the secret isn't just about your grandmother. There was a crime, Nora. Someone died. Someone close to your family. The truth was buried to protect you all, to give you a chance at a life without fear. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Someone wants them to come out now, for reasons I don't know." Nora's world spun. Who died? Who is trying to expose the past? Before Rayhan could answer, chaos erupted. Sami, watching from the edge of the platform, shouted. A shadow dashed from behind a rusted sign, lunging between Nora and Rihan. In a blur, the stranger snatched the tin box from Sami's arms and sprinted away, feet pounding over gravel and weeds. "Stop!" Nora yelled, but the thief melted into the shadows. Nora and Sammy chased after, stumbling over rails and roots, but the night was too thick, their breaths too loud. They stopped, defeated, as silence settled back over the platform. They returned home breathless, hearts pounding, the tin box and its secrets, now in the hands of someone unknown and dangerous. Nora looked at Sammy, her fear mirrored in his eyes. The past was no longer content to sleep, and as dawn crept over Wren Street, they knew that what was buried at midnight would change their family forever. The house was uneasy the next day, as if the walls themselves had overheard Nora and Sammy's breathless return the night before. Morning sunlight streamed in through the kitchen window, but it did nothing to dispel the tension thickening between the siblings and their mother. Every clatter of a spoon, every awkward pause seemed to echo with the weight of the secrets they now shared. Miriam watched them both with narrowed eyes, her suspicion barely hidden behind the morning paper. "You two look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked as they pushed their food around their plates, barely eating. "Just bad dreams," Nora lied, forcing a small smile. Her gaze darted to Sammy for support, and he nodded, mumbling something about the wind rattling his window. But Miriam's gaze lingered, and Nora wondered if her mother sensed that the ghosts in question might belong to her own past. Without the tin box, they felt exposed, as if the heart of the mystery had been snatched from them at the very moment they'd gotten close. They were left with only fragments, the faded photograph, a single copied letter, and the echo of Rayhan's haunted words on the railway platform. Nora replayed every moment from the night before, searching for something they'd missed. Who was desperate enough to steal the box? Who would risk so much just to keep the truth buried, or perhaps worse, to finally drag it into the open? After their parents left for work, Nora and Sammy retreated to the living room, the remains of breakfast left untouched on the table. "What do we do now?" Sammy asked, rubbing at his tired eyes. "Without the box, we have nothing to prove any of this." "Not nothing," Nora said, pulling the letter from her notebook and setting it alongside the photograph. "We have this, and we know someone's still trying to send us a message. Maybe we just have to dig deeper, find something no one could steal." They agreed to visit the town library, their footsteps quick on the chilly morning pavement. The library was a quiet, musty refuge from the world, its aisles of dusty shelves and old records a stark contrast to the swirling uncertainty outside. For hours they scoured the archives, reading through brittle newspaper clippings and yellowed ledgers, piecing together fragments of the town's past. After what felt like an eternity, Sammy's voice broke the silence. "Nora, look at this." He handed her an old article, nearly faded into obscurity. Local man found dead near railway. No suspects. Survived by wife and infant daughter. The name leapt out at Nora, cold and sharp. Hassan Malik, her grandfather. The article was brief, factual, with little detail. Nora read it twice, her hands trembling. She'd been told her grandfather died of illness, that his passing had been peaceful. But here was the truth in black and white. Found dead, no suspects, a mystery quietly swept aside. There was a marginal note in the article's border, written in her grandmother's elegant hand. Never let Mina know the truth. Nora's breath caught. The pieces fell into place. Rehan, the man from the photograph, had not been her grandmother's lover as she'd briefly suspected, but a confidant, perhaps a dear friend, helping to shield Miriam from the pain of knowing her father's death was no accident. Suddenly, the coded language in the letters, the secrecy, all made sense. This was a family tragedy, one so great that it had been buried deeper than any old tin box. As they left the library, the day had turned gray and cold. The world felt suddenly older, sadder. Nora's phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. She checked the screen. A message from an unknown number. Meet at the Rose Garden. Midnight. Come alone. Nora's hand trembled as she showed the message to Sammy. He read it twice, his face paling. You can't go alone, he said, voice low and fierce. This is exactly what they want, to separate us. Nora shook her head, her resolve hardening. I have to finish this, Sammy. If someone is finally ready to talk, if they're ready to tell me the truth, I need to hear it. Maybe it's Rihan, maybe it's someone else, but I can't let you get caught up in whatever this is. He pulled her into a fierce hug, holding her close. You're not alone, Nora. I'll be close by. I won't let anything happen to you. Nora nodded, drawing strength from her brother's faith in her. But as midnight approached, dread knotted her stomach. She spent the evening in her room, reading and rereading the letters, searching for clues she might have missed, for any hint as to who had orchestrated this midnight mystery. She thought about her grandmother, about the choices that had led to this tangled web, and about the pain of knowing the truth might bring more sorrow before it brought any peace. She stepped outside just before midnight, the garden bathed in eerie silver. The roses stood tall, shadows shifting with every gust of wind. She clutched the photograph in her coat pocket, her eyes straining to pierce the darkness, her breath coming quick and shallow. Whatever secrets had been buried at midnight so many years ago, tonight they were ready to rise. The moon was high and full, casting the Malik garden in a pale, almost otherworldly blue. The roses, old and wild, caught the light on their thorns, and every shadow seemed deeper, sharper, as Nora slipped through the back door. Her footsteps barely made a sound on the dew-damp grass. In her coat pocket, she clutched the old photograph and the copied letter, her pulse echoing the chime of the mantel clock as it struck midnight. She paused near the rose bushes, heart pounding. The night air smelled of earth and secrets, the hush broken only by the distant bark of a dog and the soft, nervous tap of a flashlight's beam across the tangled stems. Someone was waiting for her. She could see the faint glow moving, pausing, as if the person on the other end was as anxious as she was. Nora approached slowly, her breath fogging. The thief from the night before, a young woman, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her coat too large for her small frame, stood at the edge of the roses, the stolen tin box hugged close to her chest. Under the moon, her features came into focus, high cheekbones, a stubborn chin, and eyes that darted from Nora to the shadows and back again. For a long moment, Neither spoke. Then Nora said quietly, "You're Mrs. Karam's daughter, aren't you?" She recognized the set of her jaw, the nervous way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The Karams had lived next door for as long as Nora could remember, but their families rarely spoke. Polite greetings, nothing more. The woman nodded. Her voice, when it came, was fragile but determined. "My name's Layla. My mother was Hassan Malik's sister. She and your family stopped speaking after his death. I found the box hidden by my grandmother. She kept it for years, along with the old letters Rihan wrote. My mother always blamed yours for not telling the whole story. She thought she thought there were secrets your family wouldn't share." Nora's breath caught in her throat. All her life she'd felt the chill between the houses, the absence of shared laughter or stories. She remembered, suddenly, Mrs. Karam standing alone in her garden, eyes always lingering on the Malik house with a strange mixture of longing and regret. "Why send the letters to me?" Nora asked, her voice trembling. Layla looked down, shame coloring her cheeks. "I wanted answers. When I found the box and read those letters, Rihan's, your grandmother's, I thought maybe your family was hiding something terrible, something that ruined ours. I thought if I sent the letters, you'd be forced to dig up the truth." She swallowed, then met Nora's gaze, her own eyes shining with unshed tears. "But after last night, after seeing you chase me through the dark, the way you and your brother clung to each other, I realized how much hurt these secrets have caused, not just for us, but for all of us. Maybe it's time for the truth. Maybe it's time for forgiveness." She held out the tin box. Nora took it in shaking hands, the metal icy cold. Layla stepped back, hugging her arms. "I'm sorry for what I did. I just wanted to understand. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Inside the box, beneath the bundle of old letters and photographs, Nora found something she hadn't seen before. A folded police report, yellowed and creased from years in hiding. Her breath stilled as she read. It was a confession from a neighbor, written decades ago but never filed publicly. The statement described a fight at the railway between Hassan Malik and another man, a long-standing grudge that turned deadly in the shadows. The neighbor had seen everything but never come forward, out of fear or loyalty, or perhaps just shame. The police had quietly closed the case, and the families were left to mourn in ignorance and silence. Nora closed the box and looked up. Layla lingered, hesitant. "Will you tell your mother?" she asked. Nora nodded. "She deserves to know. We all do." They parted in the blue light of the garden, an unspoken truce blooming between them. Layla disappeared into the shadows, and Nora slipped back into the house, the box held tight against her chest. She woke Sammy, who listened wide-eyed as Nora recounted the night's events and the truth she'd learned. Together they tiptoed to the kitchen, where Mariam sat in her robe, a cup of cold tea in her hands, waiting for her children, as if she'd sensed this moment would come. The three of them sat around the kitchen table, the box between them. Nora told her mother everything, about the midnight letters, about Rehan and the garden, about Layla and the confession. She watched as understanding dawned on Miriam's face, followed by a tide of grief and relief. Miriam wept, not just for her father, but for the years lost to silence and misunderstanding, for the wounds that might finally heal now that the truth was free. As the first light crept through the curtains, painting the kitchen gold, Nora wrote a letter of her own. She addressed it to no one and everyone, a message for all the families who hid their secrets out of pride or fear, who thought silence might protect, but only made the pain last longer. Sometimes the only way to heal is to let the truth speak at last. She tucked the letter among the old ones in the box and placed it back beneath the rose bushes, this time as a marker of closure, not concealment. The silent letters stopped arriving, but the midnight garden, once a place of shadows, slowly filled with forgiveness, a place where Nora and Sammy and even Layla could sit together as spring came, letting the past be what it was. There, with every new rose, they promised each other that secrets would never again be buried in silence. And as dawn rose over Wren Street, the Malik family finally stepped into the light, whole and honest, ready to begin again. The city never truly slept, but some streets became nearly silent in the small hours when even the hum of the overhead lines faded into a hush. On Bleecker Lane, the only steady light came from the blue glow of phone screens, night shift workers swiping through headlines, insomniacs lost in endless scroll, or in Detective Lila Ahmed's case, those haunted by open cases and unspoken regrets. The world outside her precinct window was all wet pavement and distant neon. Layla sat at her desk, files spread around her like the petals of a tired flower, fourth coffee cooling at her elbow. She'd been combing through cold case reports, her mind stuck on the kind of details that only surface when everyone else has gone home. The heater rattled as a cold wind howled down the empty corridors. Her phone rang, shrill and urgent, slicing through the pre-dawn lull. She recognized the number as an unknown local cell, but something in her gut made her answer. Detective Ahmed? The voice was young, male, threaded with panic. I need help. Please, someone's in my house. I. The line crackled with static, then cut off. Layla stared at her phone, adrenaline flooding her veins. She tapped into the precinct's call trace software. Within a minute, she had the address, Unit 14B, Miramar Towers, on the city's south side. She radioed for backup, grabbing her coat as she raced through the quiet precinct. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. Her partner, Samir, met her at the car, his hair still tousled from half sleep. What's up? Possible home invasion. Possible kidnapping. Caller sounded terrified, Layla said, peeling out onto the slick streets. It took them 10 tense minutes to reach Miramar Towers, a hulking slab of 1970s concrete and glass that crouched at the edge of the financial district. The lobby was deserted, the security guard half asleep behind thick glass. Layla and Samir flashed their badges, pounding up the stairs when the elevator proved too slow. They found Unit 14B on the fourth floor, the door hanging slightly ajar. Layla motioned for silence, her hand hovering near her weapon as she nudged the door open. Police, she called softly. No answer. Inside, the apartment was dark, lit only by the blinking light on a Wi-Fi router and the faint glow from a laptop screen. The space was obsessively neat, so much so that it screamed nervous energy rather than comfort. Jackets hung at identical angles, shoes lined up like soldiers, surfaces gleaming. On the carpet near the couch lay a phone, screen glowing with the call history still open. The name at the top, Armin Qureshi. A quick search revealed no sign of Armin. The bedroom, bed made, but pillows askew. The closet door half open as if someone had hurriedly searched through it. The bathroom, a damp towel, toothbrush dropped in the sink. The kitchen, a cup on the counter, tea half drunk and cold. No blood, no signs of a struggle, but something was off. A laptop on the desk displayed a paused video call. The camera on the other side showed nothing but a blank wall, no faces, no movement. Layla's skin prickled with unease. Samir checked the windows, locked from inside. He didn't just walk out. he murmured, peering out at the silent city below. Lila sat on the edge of the couch, reviewing the call logs on Armin's phone. The last call, her own, came at 4:11 a.m. Before that, several messages, all within the last hour, all unread. She scrolled through them, hoping for a clue, a name, a threat, a plea for help. All she found were increasingly frantic texts from someone labeled Sis, Mariam. The most recent, "Are you okay? Please answer me. Armin, I'm scared." On the coffee table, half buried under a pile of unopened mail, sat a crumpled sheet of notebook paper. Layla smoothed it out, heart beating faster as she read the shaky handwriting. "If something happens, find the locker. The code is my birthday. Please trust me." No signature, but it had to be Armin's. Layla scanned the room again, searching for more clues. There were no signs of forced entry, no neighbors in the hall, none awake at this hour to witness anything, nothing except the echo of a terrified voice, the mess of a life left suddenly unfinished, and a chilling silence pressing at her ears. Back outside, the city was already waking up. Taxis honked at the next corner. A siren wailed somewhere distant, and the first bakery on Bleecker Lane threw open its doors. Layla stood beneath the buzzing street lamp, scanning the horizon as a faint blush of pink crept upward. She could see her own reflection in the glass doors, tired eyes, clenched jaw, the burden of another lost soul added to her list. Samir joined her, hands in his pockets. "Nothing in the stairwell. Security's pulling footage, but it's already too late." Layla finished for him, voice barely above a whisper. "Doesn't feel right," he agreed. "You think he ran?" "Maybe, but I don't think so. He was scared, not stupid." As the first birds began to sing, Lila checked Armin's phone one last time before bagging it for evidence. There, nestled between missed calls and worried messages, was a single text she hadn't noticed before, sent at 4:13 a.m., just 2 minutes after the desperate call for help. The message glowed in the gathering daylight. "If I don't make it, the truth is in the locker. Please tell my sister." Layla pocketed the phone, her resolve hardening. The city was waking, oblivious to what had happened behind this quiet door, but she would not let Armin become just another ghost swallowed by the shadows. Not tonight. Sleep was a stranger to Layla that morning. After returning from Miramar Towers, she tossed restlessly on her narrow cot in the precinct's break room, her mind replaying the panicked call, the unanswered texts, the desperate note on Armand's table. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again. "Please, someone's in my house." I cut off, swallowed by static and fear. Dawn crept in through the dirty blinds, painting the city in shades of gray. By noon, after two more coffees and a shower as brisk as a police interrogation, Layla was back on the move. Her first stop was Miramar Towers. The security guard on the night shift had been replaced by a young woman with sharp eyes and a bored expression. She queued up the CCTV footage at Layla's request. "No sign of your guy leaving between 3:30 and 6 a.m." she confirmed, scrubbing through the silent, flickering images of the lobby and hallways. "And nobody came in?" Layla pressed. The woman shook her head. "Not unless they came through the fire escape or a window on the fourth floor. But you saw those, locked up tight." Samir canvassed the floor, talking to neighbors. Most had slept through the night. Only Mrs. Bono, the retiree across the hall, offered anything at all. "I thought I heard a dog barking around 4," she told Samir, clutching her robe tighter. "Stray, probably. Sometimes they sneak in, but I didn't see a soul." Layla noted the detail. Little things meant a lot when a case went cold in under an hour. Her next move was guided by Armin's last messages. Find the locker. The code is my birthday. Please trust me. She used her connections to check Armin's financials. A safe deposit box popped up at City Safe Bank, a discreet building on a quiet corner near the courthouse. Its sterile marble lobby and hushed atmosphere seemed designed to keep secrets safe. Missing persons cases had a way of lighting fires under bureaucrats. Layla got her warrant within the hour. The bank manager, a thin, fastidious man with a navy tie, glanced at her badge, then led her and Samir down a hallway lined with silent cameras and thick doors. Inside the vault, the air was cold enough to bite. Locker 134 waited at waist height behind a brushed steel door. Layla punched in Armin's birthday, 03/17/1997. Her hands shook a little. The code beeped, and the lock slid open. Inside, the contents were shockingly sparse: a single manila envelope and a small, battered black notebook. Layla glanced at Samir, then pulled both out with gloved hands. They moved to a private cubicle to examine the contents. The notebook was densely filled: names, dates, and columns of numbers. Some pages held neat entries: deposit 2000 BR, withdrawal 1000 SK. Others were frantic, nearly illegible, whole lines circled, underlined, or slashed through. Samir leaned over her shoulder, frowning. Looks like a ledger. Money in, money out. But for what? Layla flipped to a page near the end. A name leapt out: Dr. Samir Khan, the high-profile research scientist whose photograph had splashed across news sites only weeks before. His department was being audited for missing grant money. Rumors swirled, but nothing had been proven. Several entries referenced payments to SK and another set to BR. Layla guessed BR was Bilal Rashid, Khan's longtime associate and head of operations at the research lab. As she turned the final page, her breath caught at Armin's slanted handwriting, this time different, rushed, anxious. If anything happens, it's because of the project. Don't trust anyone, not even the police. As she turned the final page, her breath caught at Armin's slanted handwriting, this time different, rushed, anxious. If anything happens, it's because of the project. Don't trust anyone, not even the police. A chill swept over her. Had Armin uncovered more than just theft? Something about the ledger's pattern, sums, repetition, dates, felt off, too regular to be mere embezzlement. Layla's mind raced, connecting headlines, rumors, the recent spike in overdoses near the university. She opened the envelope, expecting more notes, but inside was a small flash drive and a folded letter. The letter, addressed with a careful hand: To my sister, Miriam. If you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. I found out something about the research project. They threatened me. Everything is on the drive. Please go to Detective Ahmed. She'll know what to do. I love you. Arman, for a moment, Layla felt the weight of the siblings' bond, a promise of protection, a plea for help. She placed the drive in her pocket and the notebook with it, then looked at Samir. This isn't just a missing person, is it? He shook his head. And whoever wanted Arman gone, they might want us quiet too. They left the bank, crossing the empty marble lobby. Lila's phone buzzed as soon as they stepped onto the pavement. A blocked number. She answered, voice calm. Detective Ahmed. A voice replied, digitally distorted, the words barely more than a hiss. Stop asking questions, detective, or you'll be next. The call ended before she could reply. Lila stood frozen on the steps, the city's noise suddenly distant. She stared at her reflection in the mirrored bank window. A woman now enmeshed in something darker than she'd imagined. Her jaw clenched. The rules had changed. This wasn't just a hunt for Armin, it was a race against a threat willing to kill to keep secrets hidden. As Samir rejoined her, she slid the notebook deeper into her coat. Ready for this? He asked quietly. Layla nodded, resolve burning in her chest. We don't back down now. Not when someone's life is on the line. Above them, the sun was already dipping behind city towers, casting long shadows over the streets. Somewhere out there, a young man's fate, and maybe the truth behind a web of corruption, waited to be discovered. And Laila Ahmed was not going to stop until she'd brought it all into the light. The next day dawned gray and restless, with low clouds threatening rain and the whole city buzzing with the kind of tension Layla always associated with unfinished business. She barely noticed the sunrise as she and Samir huddled in the precinct's small evidence room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the restless tap of keyboards. The air was thick with purpose and something darker. They worked in grim tandem, decoding the numbers from Armin's notebook and cross-referencing them with public records and anything else they could find. Bit by bit, a sprawling network emerged, shell companies on paper only, all tied through addresses, emails, or just the pattern of cash flows to Dr. Samir Khan's research foundation and his business partner, Bilal Rashid. The ledger's figures matched up to suspicious wire transfers, each cleverly disguised as consulting fees, equipment purchases, or research bonuses. But it was the flash drive that changed everything. Samir had cracked its password after hours of guessing, Miriam's birthday, as it turned out. Inside was a trove of confidential project files, some stamped with official seals, others simply labeled by date and code. There were lists of trial subjects, payment schedules, and files marked suppressed results. Hidden in a folder called Personal, Layla found surveillance photos, hundreds of them. Armin's face stared out in many, walking to work, leaving his gym, waiting for a bus with Mariam. The photos spanned months. Chillingly, in one corner, she found three blurry shots of herself, snapped outside the precinct and once at a coffee stand she frequented. It's not just about money, Samir muttered, scrolling through more images. They were watching everyone. Layla's mouth went dry. They were tying up loose ends, making sure no one talked. The files also included clinical trial data, patient lists with coded IDs, red flag test results, and a series of falsified safety reports. The names of several patients were underlined in red, with notes about hush payments. Layla's hands shook as she realized some had died, deaths covered up, marked as unrelated or accidental overdose. It's an experimental drug trial, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They knew it was dangerous, but pushed it through anyway. Anyone who asked questions, anyone who got in the way. A whistleblower had tried to alert authorities. Copies of emails and returned messages littered one folder, each stamped "No further action." Layla read a message sent to a government agency begging for an investigation. The reply was cold, dismissive, and unsigned. Then they found it, a single video file labeled "Final Message." Layla clicked play, Samir leaning in, the screen filled with Armin's face. He was in a small, bare room, eyes rimmed red with fear and sleeplessness. He looked much older than 25, and his hands trembled as he gripped the edge of a table. "If you're watching this, I'm either missing or dead," he began, voice raw. "Dr. Khan and Bilal Rashid are covering up failed trials. People are dying. I can't stay silent. I think they're after me. And if they know I spoke to Detective Ahmed, she's in danger too. Mariam, please forgive me. I love you. Tell the truth. He ended with a choked sob, shoulders shaking, and reached out as if to turn off the camera. The timestamp in the corner read 3:59 a.m., barely minutes before his call to Layla. For a long time, the room was silent except for the hum of the computer. Samir finally broke it. Why didn't he run? Layla stared at the frozen image on the screen. He wanted to protect his sister. He thought I could help. He didn't want to disappear without trying. They returned to the Miramar Tower security footage, eyes aching from the flickering screen. At 4:08 a.m., a tall man in a black jacket entered the stairwell, face obscured by the camera angle. Layla leaned forward. There. That's him. Whoever he is, he went straight for Armin. Seconds later, the feed glitched, static and artifacts swallowing the screen. When it cleared at 4:15, the man was gone. Layla sent the footage to the digital lab, her nerves stretched thin as piano wire. The man in black, enforcer, scientist, or killer, had to be the key. She stared at the still image, memorizing every detail, the way he held his hands, the set of his shoulders, the reflection of something, a ring maybe on his right hand. That evening, Layla called Miriam, asking her to meet at a small cafe away from downtown. Miriam arrived pale and trembling, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Layla handed her Armand's letter and gently explained what they'd found. Miriam's face crumpled as she read her brother's words. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. He was scared, but he wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to protect me. Will you find him? Layla reached across the table, squeezing Miriam's fingers. Even if it's too late, I promise. Before dawn breaks again, we'll know what happened. For a moment, hope flickered in Miriam's eyes, and Layla felt the pressure of that promise settle over her shoulders like a new badge. As Layla left the cafe, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Across the street, parked under a broken street lamp, was a dark sedan she didn't recognize. A figure sat in the driver's seat, black jacket, cold stare. Their eyes met for a split second, then the engine roared to life and the car sped away. Layla pressed her hand to her chest, steadying her breath. She was being watched. The danger wasn't over, it was closing in. Above the rooftops, the sky faded from blue to purple as evening gave way to night. In the gathering shadows, Layla vowed again to keep her promise, whatever the cost. The final message before dawn was out there, and she wouldn't stop until she found it. Just 4 words, enough to send a chill down Layla's spine. Someone is following me. Without hesitation, Layla called Samir, her voice urgent and low. Get Miriam, take her to the safe house on 6th. Don't tell anyone. I'll join you soon. Are you sure? Yes, and Samir, watch your back. We can't trust anyone. As soon as the line went dead, Layla made her decision. She was done watching from the shadows. The evidence was ironclad: ledgers, emails, photos, a confession from Armin. She needed a direct confrontation, something to shake Dr. Khan and Bilal Rashid into exposing their panic, their guilt, or a critical mistake. Tonight, she would force the truth into the open, whatever the cost. She packed her evidence, flash drive, notebook, a backup copy of Armin's final video into her bag. Then, donning a dark jacket, she slipped out into the cold. The city seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. She parked her car 2 blocks from the research center, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she crossed the empty lot behind the building. The center itself was mostly dark, save for a line of yellow light beneath the rear door. The door was ajar, a warning sign or a trap. Layla gripped her flashlight and slipped inside. The hallways echoed with her every step, floor tiles reflecting pools of light from occasional fixtures overhead. The silence was so thick she could hear her own heart pounding. Most offices were closed, blinds drawn tight. Only one door was open, Dr. Samir Khan's. He was waiting for her. The sight would have unsettled anyone else. Dr. Khan in a tailored suit, perfectly calm behind his polished desk, as if this were a routine late night meeting rather than a confrontation with the truth. Detective Ahmed, he said, voice soft but steely. I hear you've been asking a lot of questions. Layla kept her hand on her bag, posture taut. I have your files, Dr. Khan, the trial records, the payoff schedules, the overdose reports. It's over. He smiled thinly, his eyes cold. You have nothing admissible. Who will believe a dead man's word? You know how this city works. Layla pulled the flash drive from her pocket, holding it up. This isn't just Armin's word. There's enough here to put you away for a very long time. Confess, and maybe your partner will get a deal. For a moment, Khan's mask slipped. She saw the tension in his jaw, the faint twitch in his fingers. Then his eyes hardened. You don't understand, detective. There are people above me, people who don't hesitate to keep secrets. You're risking more than your job tonight. He pressed a button under his desk. That night, sleep was a luxury Layla could no longer afford. She sat at her kitchen table with the city's darkness pressing against the window, the blue-white glare of her laptop painting harsh shadows across her face. The files Armand had collected were spread out before her, forming a jagged mosaic of greed, cruelty, and betrayal. She combed through each one, mind mapping every connection between Dr. Khan, Bilal Rashid, the shell companies, and the growing list of overdose victims in the city's poorest districts. She saw patterns where once there had been chaos. Money moved, reports disappeared, lives ruined and then erased. Her phone vibrated twice. The first was a blocked call, the voice little more than a hiss. Leave this alone, or you'll end up like him. Layla's hand tightened around her mug. Fear and anger warred in her chest, but fear would not win tonight. She was too close. The second vibration was a message from Mariam. With a heavy slam, the door behind Layla locked. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Bilal Rashid entered, filling the door frame. A thick-set man, face shadowed, his presence radiating menace. He crossed the room, cutting off Lila's escape. You should have walked away, Bilal growled, voice deep as a drum, his fists clenched at his sides. We gave you every chance. Layla's mind raced. She reached for her phone, pressing record with one thumb and tucking it at her sleeve, praying the mic would pick up every word. She raised her voice, trying to keep it steady. You're going to kill me, like you killed Armin. Khan's sneer was icy. You brought this on yourself. Some people can't let things go. He opened his desk drawer, fingers closing around something metal. Layla moved before she could think, swinging her flashlight in a wide arc. It smashed into a glass cabinet beside Khan's desk, shattering it. The piercing alarm blared to life, flooding the building with a wailing siren. Lights strobed overhead, red and white, turning the room into a flickering nightmare. In the chaos, Bilal lunged for her. Layla ducked, slipping under his grasp, grabbing the edge of the desk for momentum. She kicked over a chair, sending it skittering into his shins. Khan shouted, reaching for the desk phone, but Layla was already bolting for the side door, the fire exit she'd spotted earlier. She slammed her shoulder into the bar and burst out into the freezing night air. Shots rang out behind her, bullets sparking off the alley's brick walls. She dove behind a dumpster, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. She waited until the shouting faded, then crawled out, scraping her knees, and sprinted down the alley. Her hands shook as she dialed Samir. He picked up on the first ring. Layla, are you all right? They tried to kill me. Meet at the safe house now. We have to go public. No more secrets, no more waiting. Tonight. As she hung up, Layla paused in the dark alley, the city's lights blurred through her tears, and the sting of adrenaline. She'd survived the trap, but she knew. Tonight, there would be no more hiding for anyone. Dawn was still a long way off, but Layla Ahmed was ready to deliver her final message. By the time dawn crested the city's skyline, gold and violet spilling over rooftops and washing the world in new light, Layla and Samir sat in the windowless interview room at police headquarters. The heavy, secure door was watched by two trusted officers, men Layla knew she could rely on. Even with so much trust shattered, the table between them was crowded with the night's work. Armin's ledger, the black notebook, Miriam's trembling hands clutching her brother's letter, and a stack of printouts and flash drives that held the truth. Samir was pale, exhausted, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. Miriam, wrapped in a borrowed sweater, looked hollow and brave at once. She barely glanced at the officers outside. Her world had been torn apart and remade in the space of hours. Senior detectives and prosecutors filed in, men and women with grave faces and sleepless eyes, summoned by Samir's urgent call and the evidence Layla presented. The room filled with the click of pens, the rustle of reports, and the quiet tension of those about to face something much larger than themselves. Layla stood, her laptop open. She pressed play on Armin's final message, turning the screen to face the room. She watched the faces around her, some skeptical, some open, some still unwilling to believe what they might see. But as Armin's trembling words spilled out, as his fear and courage and love for his sister echoed through the silence, the mask of detachment slipped. Even the hardest of them grew quiet, eyes hardening not with disbelief, but with anger and determination. She moved through the evidence, the ledger's payments and withdrawals, the flash drive's folders of falsified reports, bribe schedules, patient lists, emails pleading for an investigation. She laid out the timeline step by step, the first overdoses, the missing money, the threatening messages, and finally the fate of Armin Qureshi, who had risked everything because he could not let others die. For a moment, the room was still, the only sound Miriam's soft sobs. Then a gruff voice broke the hush. Who else knows? Everyone will, Layla said, her tone steel. It's time. The raid on Dr. Samir Khan's home came as the sun was rising, the city painted in the softest gold. Khan was still in his dressing gown, Bilal Rashid with him, both blinking in disbelief as a wall of blue uniforms and flashing lights filled their quiet street. Forensic teams swept through Khan's lab and home, digging out records, unlocking hidden computers, prying open safes. They found everything: batches of tainted drugs, secret ledgers, envelopes thick with cash, and coded files on destroyed hard drives. Witnesses began to come forward, emboldened by news of the arrests. A former lab assistant confessed to shredding documents under orders. A nurse, eyes red from sleepless nights, told of being paid to alter records. One mother, voice shaking, told the press how her son's death had been marked as an accident, Until now, no one had cared enough to listen. The city's web of silence was finally broken. News vans ringed police headquarters. Reporters crowded the steps. In every cafe and workplace, people whispered about the secrets that had simmered for years just below the city's surface: corruption, callousness, and the cost of silence. For the first time, the names of the lost were spoken in daylight. In the press room, Miriam stood beside Layla, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. Cameras flashed as she read from Armand's last letter. My brother wasn't a criminal. He was brave. He tried to save lives. He believed that the truth matters more than anything. I want everyone to know what he did, so no other family will ever be left in the dark. The city paused, listening, the story spreading like sunlight across dark corners. Other families began calling the police, people with suspicions, people who had lost loved ones and never known why. Some called to thank the department, others called to ask for justice. Layla watched it all unfold from the edge of the press room, heart aching and full at once. She knew there would be more questions, more cases, and more pain. But for the first time in many long months, she allowed herself to believe that change was possible. In the hush that followed the press conference, Layla found herself staring out the window at the city she had served for so long. The sun was fully up now, painting the tallest spires and the tiniest windows alike. She thought of Armand, his voice, his bravery, the ordinary courage that had changed everything. She thought of Miriam, her stubborn hope. She thought of every victim whose voice had been lost in the night, every family waiting for a knock on the door. Her phone buzzed. A message sent from Armand's phone, a note she'd saved for herself as a reminder and a vow. Never stop searching for the truth. Before dawn comes, someone always needs to be heard. She typed her own reply and saved it, not to be sent, but to live as a quiet promise. I won't stop. Your voice will always matter. Later, as the city woke to headlines of corruption and courage, Layla stood on the station steps, her coat wrapped tight against the breeze. She watched the first rays of sunlight strike the city's towers, gold and sharp, banishing the last of the night's chill. She let herself hope for Miriam, for the families now gathering the pieces of their lives, for the possibility that justice would not always come too late. The final message, she realized, was not one of fear, but of resolve. For Layla, for Miriam, for every victim and every survivor, the day had finally arrived. There would always be shadows before dawn, but now, at last, the truth had found the light.